For this next tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to 3D model a banana using a reference image, as well as some more tools that you can find in the bottom of the modeling toolkit here under Mesh, Components, and Tools. So for this, I want you to go ahead and download the banana file that I added to the week 2 document. And the same way we did with the apple, I want you to copy and paste it into your project folder. So go ahead and paste it under your source images folder, under your Maya overall project folder. And once it's there, let's go back to our scene and again, switch to your side view. And under your side view, go to View, Image Plane, and Import Image. Find your banana image and import it into your scene. So I'm going to hide all of these objects so we can focus on the banana for now. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and make more layers. So let's add our lamp layer by selecting our lamp and then going into layers, create layer from selected. So here we have our lamp. Let's rename it as lamp with an underscore so that we don't have the same repeated name here and on our outliner. Let's hide the lamp. Now let's hide our table. So what we have left is our apple. So let's go ahead and make another layer. Create layer from selected by selecting our apple. And let's call this apple underscore save. And we can also rename our apple here without the underscore so that the names are different. Now let's go ahead and hide this. So this is our second image plane in our scene. The first one was for the apple and this one is for the banana. Now let's go to perspective view. And I'm going to show you how to start from a smaller, very basic geometry and how to grow from there. So in order to do this, we're going to go to the Poly Modeling tab here, or go to Create Polygon Primitives, and we want to create a cube. Okay, so now that we've created our cube, you can tell that my pivot point has kind of been shifted around. If this happens, it's probably because when you're doing the D and V command to move it, you accidentally rotated it. See, you can accidentally do this. So if it is not aligned, you want to make sure you put it back. The way to do that is just by pressing D and V, and instead of using the move tool, you can just use the rotate tool to align it. So this looks much better. So now that I have my cube, this is going to be my starting point for my banana. So it's going to be right at the center. And maybe it needs to be a little bit bigger. So under Polycube in the attribute editor, maybe I'm going to make it 1.5 in all directions. Okay, so now that we have our base profile, which is basically the sides of the banana, we're going to evolve this shape into something that looks more like what we want. So to do this, let's go back to the modeling toolkit and let's select our face component. So I'm going to select this side face here. And under components, click extrude. So this poly extrude face toolbar pops up, and you can see here, if I just drag over where it says thickness, I can change its thickness, right? So let's go ahead and extrude it a little bit. And now that it's extruded, we want to go to vertex mode, and we want to drag these vertices up. So if I hit move, my pivot point is up here. I want to move it down, so I'm going to drag it down using my D command. Or with D and V, I want to snap it. Again, make sure you don't hit the rotate. So I want to move these vertices up so that they're following this curve, right? And then these bottom ones, I also want to move them up. So I'm going to select them and then hit D and V to drag my pivot point down and move them up. So this is a little bit more, a little bit closer to that profile. Now let's go back to face mode and select this last face that we extruded, and we're going to extrude it once more. So we're going to keep doing this, repeating this step all the way until we get to this point. And then we're going to go to the other side of the banana, and we're going to do the same until we get up here. So select my face, hit extrude, and then extrude its thickness up a bit. Go back to vertex mode, select the top vertices, hit W to move my pivot point, get in the right view, and then move these vertices up. Select the bottom vertices, move my pivot point, and drag them up again. Now I'm going to go again to face mode, select this last face I extruded, extrude this again, out, and select my vertices, hit W to move my pivot point up, and move these vertices up. Then select the bottom vertices and move them up as well. Maybe I can select these. Whoops. Okay, so make sure, be careful not to select all 4 vertices. See, now since I was working on the side view, I didn't correctly select my vertices. So I'm going to undo my last move commands and go back and make sure that both of my vertices are selected. So now they're selected. I'm going to move my move tool here. You can also work with the side view. To do all of this. Okay, I'm going to maybe adjust this vertice up a bit so you can start to go ahead and detail all of the vertices in your 3D model. Okay, I'm going to go back to face mode and extrude this last face. And this is probably going to be my last step on this side of the banana. So now that it's extruded, I'm going to go back to vertex mode, select these 2 vertices, hit W, move my pivot point up, and I want to have it somewhere around here. Now I'm going to select the bottom vertices and drag my pivot point, hit D and V, drag my pivot point down. And I want to have it somewhere around here. Okay, this looks about right. We'll be able to go back and add much more detail into our banana afterwards. Okay, so now let's work on the other side. So I'm going to go back to my perspective mode and select my face selection mode and select the left side. And I'm going to hit extrude. And let's extrude this face out. And repeat the steps we did on the other side. So if we go to our side view, we can select the side edges, move our pivot points, and bring them up. Let's go ahead and extrude this last face again. So select it and hit extrude. Extrude it out a bit. And in our side view, we can go back to edge selection and select and move our vertices. You don't necessarily need to move your pivot point every time you need to edit a vertice, but you'll get used to knowing when it makes sense to move it and when it doesn't. It's a good practice in the beginning to do it. So let's go back to face selection mode, extrude again. And then go back to my side view, go to vertex mode, select my edge, bring it up, and select my bottom edge, bring it up, and it looks like we'll need an extra step to extrude here. So I'm going to bring this down a bit. Go back to face, select this face, hit extrude, extrude this out a bit, and now we want to go to vertex mode and bring these up, and these bottom ones want to go all the way up here. So maybe it makes more sense to bring this one down a bit. And let's do a last extrude now. Select these edges and bring them up. All right, so we have this profile working now pretty well. We can keep extruding all the way up here and just finish the stem. So to do this, let's go to extrude again. And now let's try some other functions. So let's see what offset does. Offset can be pretty useful for this part because we maybe want to make the stem a little bit more thin. So we can offset our face inwards and then extrude it. And it'll make it a little bit more thin. We can also add divisions. So if we wanted to add more steps, for example, maybe we can add a second step here to gradually shrink our stem. So I'm going to go to vertex mode and drag these 4 points up. Oops, I need to make sure the 4 of them are selected and that nothing else is selected. Drag them up. I think I selected another vertex point. Yeah. So if I hit Control and click on it, it deselects it. Okay. It's much easier to model with the side view. Let's select these 2 other points and bring them here. So it's really helpful to have a reference image, and you can even draw your own image to use as a reference when 3D modeling. So this looks about right. Let's go back to our object mode and take a look at what we have so far. So if we select our image plane and just hit Control H to hide it, you can see that we have the rough geometry of what our banana looks like. Maybe it's a little bit too wide. Okay, so let's go back and scale our overall object inwards a little bit and make it a little bit more thin. I'm going to turn my image plane on again. And now let's look at some more functions under our modeling toolkit. So we can make the edges of our banana be a little bit more smooth. Let's try this with Bevel. So if I go to edge selection mode and I select, for example, this whole edge radius and hit Bevel, you'll see that I have some options for this. So the first one is the fraction of how much I want to bevel. And then the second one is how many segments I want to add to round it. So you can start rounding up your shape like this. So whenever you're working with 3D modeling, always think that you want to start from the general shape and then go into adding more detail. This looks about right. You can go ahead and try and see what all these other functions do. So depth will actually either bevel it inwards or outwards. Okay, let's go select the bottom loop now. And again, let's bevel this. So I want to add a fraction and then add some segments to it. And now let's work on this other side. So I've hit Bevel again and added some segments. You should also think about the aesthetic you want. So you don't necessarily have to go for like the hyper-real look of making your banana seem identical. You can always play with making it look maybe a little bit more like a cardboard model or more of a 2D illustration. It's really up to you. So I think I like something more like this. Let's hide again our image plane, Control H. This is looking pretty well. I could maybe try and work with this stem and make it a little bit more irregular. So if I go to edge mode, maybe I want to drag these edges in. Remember that the more detail you start adding, the harder it'll be to edit your model afterwards. That's why it's good to go to work from the overall general shape and then add more detail. I could have done this step of making my stem a little bit more rounded before I worked on bevel, because now I have to select all of these tiny little edges and it can start getting more complicated. So I've selected these edges. I could have also selected the face actually. Let's go ahead and do that. Select the face and then hit W, snap my pivot point up here, and I want to scale this inwards and I want to do it towards the center. So let's move my pivot point somewhere more towards the center of my stem. And now hit scale and scale it in a bit. So it's something kind of like this. I want to also now go to object mode. I want to show you a last function, which is smooth. What smooth does is it adds subdivisions to your mesh. So if I select my whole banana and I hit smooth, you'll see here that it's a function to add more subdivisions and smooth your whole geometry out. So I'm going to choose maybe to add 3 more divisions along each subdivision that already existed. And you can see now my banana is much closer to the smoother geometry. We'll work on adding textures and materials to your scene in future tutorials, and with this you'll get a more realistic look too.